Get started here. Okay. So yeah, talking about the differences between the two trips, and then there are a couple other long distance walkers who are visible online, and they have. I just wanted to touch on them as well, and my next sort of dream walk, which will finalize the triumvirate of my maritime walking. So I did PEI and Nova Scotia, and my next route, which will include New Brunswick. So that was Maitland. So yeah, just to tell you a little bit about myself, to introduce myself, or say how I qualify myself these days. This is me on my food tour, which I just started last summer, and I don't know if anyone's been on a food tour or a culinary walking tour, but it's kind of a way to explore the city, get a feel for the neighborhood. And I always tell people that I think the best way to explore a new place is to do it on foot, because you really get a feel for the place, and then we stop in these little locally owned restaurants and taste the food, so you get a feel for the neighborhood, a taste of the area, and then you hear the story behind each restaurant. Everybody has a vision of where they came from and how they started. And I have a background in theater. I acted for about 10 years, and then also a writer. I'm writing for a small magazine in Halifax now called Local Connections Halifax, just about my experience living in the city and sort of being a tourist in your own city. And I've written some plays, which I enjoy, and I also qualify myself as a long-distance walker. It's really what I love to do. Tom was talking sort of about the physical difficulties of it, but I set those aside because I love it so much, and it sort of makes me feel like I'm exactly where I need to be in the world. So I tell people that I don't think of myself as an athlete, and when I was little, I didn't really have any athletic goals or special wishes to do anything kind of extraordinary, but I did grow up in New Brunswick in a very rural setting, and my dad was a very nature individual, and so walking, we were just outside a lot. We'd go for hikes in the woods. He would find these beaver ponds and that, and being outdoors was just kind of a big part of our lives as kids. Although I never really thought of myself as athletic, I think that probably had an influence on me. This was part of my paper route when I was a kid. But I was thinking about one of the things that really draws me to walking and long distance walking is sort of a mental or spiritual, a creative place that it puts me into, it's almost aside from the physical. I remember one walk that I had home from school when I was 10 or so, and I got these sort of creative ideas to write something, actually, and the ideas are kind of popping in as I went along, and I think that's a big part of walking for me, and long distance walking. And I remember in 2010 when I was doing my walk around Nova Scotia, I was kind of dreaming about starting up my own business, and as I had all this time on the road for the 88 days, I'd say I spent about 2/3 of the walk on my own, and then about 1/3 where people came out to walk with me. So I had a lot of time alone when I was dreaming and thinking, and I really feel that kind of walking. It allows you to expand your creative minds. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, when I got back, most people asked me two things. How much weight did you lose? And how many pairs of sneakers did you go through? And I actually only went through 2 pairs of sneakers. I brought an extra pair, and I would just switch them every day because I wanted to wear them evenly. But at the end of it, it was they were toast, for sure. But a lot of people just want to ask, why? What made you think to do this thing? And I don't really have a definite answer, except that I really feel like I was led to do it. And I don't remember the specific time that I got the idea in my head. It was PEI first that I wanted to do. but it was just like this idea that I couldn't let go of, or couldn't let go of me. Being on the ocean is a big part of it. When I mean, a lot of people want to settle along the ocean, but just walking all day and having these views and vistas, and it's exactly where I want to be. I also had this theory that we were kind of meant to move all day. Just sort of our paleo ancestry. It amazed me when I did these long walks day after day that it was almost like my body was ready to do it, and I didn't feel, except for the blisters, I didn't feel that stress. Like, I think that it was proof to me that our bodies are kind of meant to move that way. And I take great joy in the planning and the mapping and the deciding and getting the walks ready. And as I said before, I kind of feel like I was led to this or drawn to this. Maybe that's in a spiritual way. And I get this great sense of accomplishment out of these types of endeavors. It's almost like being able to look at the map and saying, I went from here to here, and it gives me great pleasure. I remember one of the first times that I got this idea, I was staying with a friend in Edmonton, and I had a week or two, and I didn't really have anything to do, and I was sort of wondering what to do to occupy myself. And I decided that I was going to walk from downtown to the West Edmonton Mall, and it seemed on the map sort of like vastly prohibitive. It only ended up being about 2.5 or 3 hours, but I just remember at the end of the walk, I just had this overwhelming sense of accomplishment. So PEI, as I say, the idea came to me. I think it was related to, I don't know if anyone's read Wayne Johnston's book, The Colony of Unrequited Dreams. I love that book. It's a fictional account of Joey Smallwood's experience in Newfoundland, and he walked the railway tracks from Port aux Basques, I think, to St. John's at one point. And the way they depict it in the novel, it's kind of, there was one time he almost dies in a snowstorm, but when I was reading that, I had that feeling like, wow, to do a walk like that. It really appealed to me. So PEI, we went as kids, as a family, every summer, and it really appealed to me. I think probably because it was small, too, and the idea of all that coastline. And my plan was to, I realized after sort of thinking it through that it's such a tourism-based province that there'd probably be enough bed and breakfasts or place to stay within walking distance of each other every night. But I was new at it, and I was learning as I went, and I started with my baby finger. If you look on a map, sort of the large maps that you get of PEI or New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, the scale, for the Nova Scotia, anyone I know for sure, if you just take the space between the knuckle on your baby figure and the tip of your nail, it's about 2 hours of walking. And so I would just pore over the map and go with my finger and say, okay, well, what could I do in that day? And I really wasn't experienced with long distance walking, so I was just guessing. I thought, well, I could probably walk for a few hours a day. So I mapped it out that way. At the time, there was, on the PEI tourism site, there was a mapping tool, but it wouldn't follow roads. It would only go in straight lines. So I remember trying to figure out what I would do in a day, and I knew it wasn't accurate because it was kind of going very straight. So I was guessing as I went, but I mapped it as best I could. And our distances, my partner at the time and I did it together. And we were just going based on where we could stay for the night. But the distances, I'd say, range from about 11 kilometers to 40 kilometers a day. And I didn't do much training to get ready. I did a couple 2-hour walks. I bought new sneakers, which was pretty silly because I remember the blisters that came. And then I decided I was going to give myself relief by getting insoles partway through, and it just raised my foot enough to give me another set of blisters directly on top of the other ones. This is Well, this is an example. It's on the PEI tourism site now, but that's a clip of what the main map of PEI looked like. And we had these papers and the map and then the route that we had drawn out. And we got in touch with all the bed and breakfasts like in February. And a few of them forgot about us. And we got there and like the motel would be closed. I remember we went up the road, we were knocking on someone's door. Do you know why they're not open? They're like, oh, they have a horse farm. We'll give them a call. They're up in the fields. But it all worked out. This was our first day. This was 24 kilometers. And I kind of mapped this like I did with the Nova Scotia one. If I would go out onto little peninsulas, but only if I didn't have to backtrack for the through line. I remember with that one, when we stopped, people just didn't think in terms of walking. When we stopped, we knew we had to go somewhere for dinner, and they said, there's a little diner up at the gas station, just 5 minutes up the road. But it was a 5-minute drive, so at the end of our day, it was a half hour's walk up to have dinner and then a half hour back. This is an example. These are just some shots. Beautiful scenery. It was funny that I had this vision of what it might be like to be so awed by the beauty of PEI, and then when I did, it was like my dream was being fulfilled every day. So this shows it on Google Maps. We didn't have that. We had a paper map. I did find a book of PEI, Atlantic Canadian back roads. I think you can still find them. And so that showed some of the dirt roads that the main map didn't. But this is an example. We found in the PEI tourism book, in print, not online, Cree's Cozy Cottages in Mimminagash. And we knew it was in Mimminagash, but we didn't know exactly where. I think the address was 301 highway such and such. And so we were walking all day. I think it was like a 35-kilometer day. And then we saw the sign on the side of the road said Mimminagash. So we're okay, well, I guess we're here. There's nothing, the scenery doesn't change. There's a few bungalows. And then we see an intersection that looks sort of like a main intersection. We can kind of see a convenience store and people converging around there. And so we went down. That was kind of the hub of the town. And they said, oh, the cottages, they're just up the road. And it was another, I think, hour and 15-minute walk. That was at the end of our day. But we were lucky to find those folks. I think there's some controversy at the time. The whole thing about these walks, I think is a big part of it too, is planning it to go through these little villages and meet. I can't get over the number of people I met and how they all had different stories. This is an example of one of our routes, and we got up to where it says B there, and we just didn't know whether to go right or left. We didn't have smartphones with us. We didn't have GPS. I think at the time the only GPS that you could get, or that I was aware of, were really expensive, and it only would go in your car. So it was very different. And I'm going to talk about how I mapped the Nova Scotia walk, another beautiful scene from PEI. With the Nova Scotia walk, I was learning about Facebook as I went, Twitter as I went. I did have a BlackBerry smartphone, which was my GPS with me, but I'm just thinking about how the entire experience would be completely different again 2.5 years later with an iPhone and letting people know as I went. When I got ready to plan the Nova Scotia walk, it was probably just a few weeks or maybe months after I got back from PEI, I thought, I wonder if I could do Nova Scotia. And just trying to figure it out financially, how do you quit your job for that amount of time? Do they give it back to you when you go? How do you pay the rent while you're gone? And on Good Friday, 3 or 4 years after PEI, I decided to just take the whole day and just see how far I could walk. And I walked 55 kilometers to Shediac. Just a picture I took of myself in a little curved mirror on the Waverley Road. So I was thinking about this walk and thinking about the walk. Again, I felt really led to it, like I couldn't let it go. Sometimes I would think, oh, there's no way I can afford this. There's no way I can make this happen. I would just be overcome with this feeling of emotional. Sorry, I'd just be really upset. It was like I really felt like I had to find a way to do it. And I was on this bus in Halifax, and they were just starting to promote their Heart and Stroke Walkabout. And so on the bus, the website for it is walkaboutns.ca, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to walk about NS. And it just struck me that maybe I could work with them and find a way to promote their project, because what they do, it's pretty incredible, and they're trying to get people together online to connect and create walking groups. They had mapping abilities online, and you could trace your route, and you could create walking groups, share your maps with other people, connect with people, and encouraging people to walk more. And that's what I wanted to do, because walking had really opened up my life and made such a difference. So I wanted to support them. I talked to them. I said, I want to take the message of Walkabout to all these small communities, and they were delighted, and they supported me in a great way. And I went to a small local business, the Trail Shop, owned by Joachim Stroink in Halifax. I think he has one in Wolfville now too. And he was a big supporter of this Brigadoon camp for children who it was just sort of getting underway. It's open now, and he suggested that I support them as well. So I was spreading the word about them, and it's a camp for children living with chronic illness. And I think about how lucky I was, with our childhood, how we were able to be out and, canoeing and hiking, and there are kids who just can't have a camp experience, a wilderness camp experience, because they're living with a chronic illness. So they've created this camp where kids can come and stay, and they have facilities and nurses and all the support for them there, so that they have that experience as kids. It just struck me as such a beautiful idea. So I created a Facebook page. I think I went to Barack Obama's Facebook page because I don't know why, but I thought, okay, I've got to create a page. I don't even know how to start. And I saw his page, and then I read up on how to create it. So at the beginning, I posted, I think I posted something I'd written about my experience walking around Nova Scotia, and then I would post as I did my training walks. I walked 2 8-hour walks a week for 6 weeks before I left. And I would take pictures as I went. I got this smartphone for the walk, but I'm thinking now, it was probably just because I was unaware, but I didn't take pictures and post them as I went, and I think that I could definitely do that now with an iPhone, although the pictures that I did take on like a regular camera and then download them to my computer and then put them up as albums afterwards, I think were probably higher quality, and I could pick and choose. But as you can see, it was just posting as I went. I was thanking the people who put me up. It was 8 months. I took 8 months and just tried to get in touch with everybody that I knew to say, would you put me up? It was parents of people I went to university with. It was people like Tom. It was all these recreational groups all over the province who just sort of took my project and ran. They spread the word. Heart and Stroke site had people who signed up for groups. They had their emails. So I remember sending out mass emails to people who were part of Heart and Stroke Walkabout and just saying, I'm going to be in your town. Do you want to come out and walk with me? Is there a group who would like to walk with me while I'm there? And do you know someone I can stay with? So I was thanking Carla. She heard about me through the Yarmouth. She was writing for the Yarmouth newspaper, and she put me up. I remember she was a dog sitter, so I was in the living room, and there were 4 dogs sleeping with me. And she came out, took pictures, and wrote a piece for me there. And the town crier in Yarmouth came out and did a proclamation. Hear ye, Emily is walking through. It was funny because not really nobody showed up for it, but there were these 3 little boys on bicycles. And so it was the town crier, Carla with her camera, and me, and the deputy mayor, and then these 3 little boys, and they just came up on their bicycles, and they listened. And they nodded, and then they drove away. It was kind of cute. I thought that you folks would be interested to see my walk in this neck of the woods. I stayed at the Friendly Bear guest house. That was a really neat experience. There were people from Ireland, a guy who walked the Pacific Coast Trail in the States, and so I planned my route. I wanted to do all of Cape Breton and stay as close to the coast as I could, and I sort of came down one side of the lakes, went up the other side of the lakes, and then did the other part and came down to Ile Madame. And that was, I met a man, I ran out of water partway through that day, and I saw this man on his lawnmower, and I just wanted to ask if I could fill up my water jug, and he got off his lawnmower and he was like 88 and he could barely walk. He was 6'6", and he said, "Everyone calls me Shorty." And he went, "I want you to see this picture." I think he had worked in the railway all his life, and someone had written up about him in a newsletter, and he was all excited to show me. It's experiences like that that were really amazing. That shows you how I planned it out. Knowing that I had done 55 kilometers that one day, I thought, well, I'll just try to average around 40 kilometers a day, but I wanted to stop in a place that was like a sort of a big enough community where I could find someone to stay with. I mean, sometimes I would call the church in the community and ask if they knew somebody that I could stay with. And it's just amazing when you think of it. Think of that many nights and that many people. Should I do something? That many people who sort of came forward, strangers who said, "No, stay with me." There was one woman who worked in recreation. She said, "I have a cottage on the Myra, and I'm not going to be there, but I told my neighbor to let you in when you get there." You know, stuff like that. It was really incredible. This is the Heart and Stroke site. So I mapped every day on the Heart and Stroke as individual routes, and then members of Heart and Stroke Walkabout could look at that. But then when I made the Facebook page, I realized that I wanted to create a Google map for every day too. But the Google Maps, at the time, I don't think I was just too dense to notice it. I think they've changed the way that they do links, but you probably saw, that was one of my training walks around town. The kids were finishing, I left at 6 in the morning, I was coming back in the evening, and the kids are finishing up their hockey game. But you can take a good link for a Google Map now, and with my website for my business, I realize it's pretty easy to have a shortened link and feed it onto your web page, and you've got a nice little map, and you can frame it or do whatever you like with it. But at that time, my Google Map links were hilarious. They were just so long. That gives you an example. And people would say, I tried to find you yesterday, but the map didn't work. And I do think, I mean, Google Maps was, maybe I was missing something, but I think Google Maps was ironing out something now, because it's much more straightforward now if you post a map on your site. And then I tried to map it out during the day. I tried to pick 3 points during the day where I could tell people roughly where I was, whether it was some intersection way out in the middle of nowhere. But I just thought if I could pick them, then people could sort of figure out where I am. But you can see I say, if you have trouble with the maps, try both. I meant like that one down there, and then the big long one. But I got a specific phone number for the walk, and people would call me. I couldn't believe it. There was a couple times, like I'd be out, really, it would really feel like I was out in the middle of nowhere. I remember walking this, like along the water. There was like maybe one bungalow every half a mile, and the wind was blowing. And as I walked, I just saw this door opening on a bungalow, like set in from the road a little bit. And this woman just stepped out in her stoop and went, "Yay!" And she was all by herself, and I really should have stopped, but I was like, "Thank you," and I kept walking. But it was stuff like that. And one woman just in the middle of the day, she just came out in the middle in this intersection, you know, those country intersections, and she said, "No, I just walked, you know, from that house, and my name's Pat, and I do this, and my husband this," and she walked with me for 5 minutes, and she went, "It's nice to meet you," and she walked back. And that was kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted people to be encouraged to come out and walk with me. That was my main thing too. So I would pick the hours that I was sort of the hours throughout the day, the 3 points during the day where I was going to stop, and then I would just feed them into to what time I started in the morning. So sometimes usually I would start at 6 in the morning, sometimes 7. In Manitou, there was an 80-something-year-old father of a friend of ours in Halifax who had a cottage that he stayed at he was in East Bay, I think, and he drove all the way out to Forshue to get me. And then he took me back, and I remember that he said, "What time do you leave? What time do you leave tomorrow?" And that one was a little later, and he was really happy. That was kind of neat because he remembered, I think he was in the war. He remembered that his grandmother didn't speak anything but Gaelic. And he remembered one expression. I can't tell it to you now, but he said, I remember one expression that she always said, and it sounded like this, and he sort of shouted it out, and it meant, "Get to work." So it was pretty neat. That was above Cape Chignecto. And Laurie, I'm just thinking of it, if he hadn't been free that day, he put me up. If he hadn't been free that day, I don't know how I would have done it, because it was this old road that was half a road, and then it turned into a 3-wheeler track, and then it took me through the park, and then I came out onto the Apple River Road, and if he was with me, I think I would have been wandering in the woods. But I remember that because I took expensive power bars that the trail shop had donated, and they were these vegan bars made with prunes and organic nuts and seeds, and I had them with me, and I said, "All right, would you have some of this?" And he said, "My wife makes granola bars that are good for you, and I don't need to buy anything like that." And I went, "Oh, just try it." And he took it over to the wrapper, and he went, "Huh, looks like bear droppings." And it did. That's what bears eat, dried nuts and seeds and all that. This is Colton, 14 years old. A friend of his mom's found me on Facebook. She decided she was going to challenge herself to walk. She walked the whole day with me. It was over 40 kilometers. She's in her 50s. He hears about it. 14-year-old kid who's interested in basketball. He goes, "I want to do that too." And he raised $1,500 for Brigadoon on his own and walked that whole day with me. And he was shy and and I just wonder why, but he wanted to challenge himself and do it. And there's different individuals that I wanted to touch on. Sable River, I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but I feel like sort of shouting to the world that Sable River they're just so passionate about their community, and sort of the whole community came out. They took me to dinner. They were like, "We want you to see this restaurant. This is a very special restaurant, and this chef is this. And we want to tell you about the town, and we won the award for the most town spirit." And they all wanted to come out and walk with me. And the best line ever, this woman, she was talking about this, and we had a community Christmas tree, and then we had a Mummers Festival. And I said, "How do you have time to do all these things?" And she said, she was 60, "We don't wear makeup, and we don't dust." It was the best. So that's how you have time to do everything. It was really extraordinary, the people that we met. I tried to get the schools involved. I know Tom's going to tell me when I'm running out of time, because I have a lot of information, but I tried to get the schools involved. I thought, I'm going to be walking by schools, and so people, if I can let the schools know, maybe the groups of kids can sort of walk, and then follow my walk online, and then when I get there, maybe they can come out and walk with me. And that did work in Advocate. There was one teacher. I stayed with somebody who was in the Board of Education, and she said, "They're busy," And the Olympic Flame had gone that year, and she said a lot of the schools that got together to try to do that, and so they just sort of didn't have time to get organized for me. I probably put the word out in February, and I was coming through the end of May and June, but Canso, I met them, and they said that they had had a series of training walks, but when I got there, school's out. But these kids, it was a rainy day, and they just happened to pause, and they were driving somewhere on an errand with Janita's mom, and she went, "Oh, you're the walker." And the kids were in flip-flops. They were like, "Oh, let us out, we want to walk with her." And they walked with me for 2 hours in flip-flops. I remember Shannon told me about her sister, and then I got in, and Canso were like, I don't know, I just got this sense that they just wanted to say, this is Canso, you know, we just lost, I can't remember what it was, they lost an industry just before I got there. They brought out the fire truck, and I stayed, it's a good example, I stayed with the receptionist of a doctor. The doctor was the mother of a woman that I went to Acadia with, who lived in New Glasgow, but she practiced in Canso several times a month, and she let me stay with, the receptionist let me stay with her. This woman came out on one of my last days into Lawrencetown, and she went, "Oh, I just told my husband I was going to walk with you for an hour." And then she called him after an hour and said, "I'm just going to walk a little more." And then she called him after 3 hours and said, "I'm just going to walk a little more." She walked with me 7 hours that day. And that was Tom. We saw some beautiful, it was really misty in the morning. That was really neat because we were coming out of Neils Harbor. And I saw my first moose with Tom. And he told me all about, he arranged for a billet for me, and he told me all about the province. That was kind of neat. I don't know if anyone knows Wayne McKay. At the time, I guess he worked for Health Promotion and Protection, and he heard about me, and he walked a whole day with me. But we set out, and then partway through the day, that tall man, he was an actor working in dinner theater at the Savoy for the summer, and he just said, well, I'll come along. And he came along for 4 or 5 hours, and then Stan and Carol, who own the Rectory Bed and Breakfast, they fed us lunch, because I passed the bed and breakfast on the way, all of us lunch. And then at the end of the day, they picked me up, and I slept there. Beautiful place. And they introduced me to this poet in town, and they had this big meal, and it was just incredible. And then they took me back to my stopping place the next day. But that was just, I just tried to post as I went along, and I tried to kind of alternate between Facebook and Twitter, and I had fun trying to be creative and thinking about interesting things to post as I went. Yeah, there are outhouses, much needed. I was always really, really happy when I found an outhouse, and I spent a certain amount of time in the woods during that walk because there are not a lot of public restrooms out in the middle of the country. I was just telling my friend the other day that when they had the article that came out about me in the Cape Breton Post, that someone was driving by and he went, "Oh, you were in the paper today," and he went and bought a paper and brought it and gave it to me through the car window so I could see it. But there are a lot of really beautiful. There's so much scenery. I took 4,000 photographs, and there's so many that were really just stunning. I mean, it's an incredible province. It really is. Am I okay? Thanks. So I'm finishing up. When I finished, I want to write a book. I haven't had time. I have at least 2 hours of voice journals that I took every day on my walk. That's a lot of material. I would love to find a way to do it. The next year after I got back, I planned to walk to Truro to raise money for the Diabetes Association. I left at 3 in the morning, and I got in at 10 at night. And I loved it. I trained for 3 weeks. The Diabetes Association has these really wonderful online ways that you can raise money through them. This is the fellow that I talked about. He's from the States. 2 months after I finished my walk, he finished a walk right across the U.S., and now he's trying to walk every single street in New York, the 5 boroughs. But this is a really special site. You can see in red what he's done, but if you click on any of those, it takes you to the day, and it links you to his blog. And, you know, there's so many ways that I could do my walk differently now in terms of doing a blog like this, using a site like this. It's called Map My Run, and it's a wonderful site, but now with WordPress, there's so many great ways to very easily have a website which will link people to the walk. This is a Canadian guy, John Beliveau. He walked the whole world. It took him 11 years, and it was 75 1,000 miles, I believe. But his site isn't detailing every day like Matt Green, but he's writing a book, and I think he's doing a lot of talks in Quebec. I went to PodCamp in Halifax, and there was one man who did a talk on all these sort of personal mapping, personal clocking. There are just so many ways to do. I mean, I had a regular walkabout pedometer, but there's so many new ways to track your miles, your calories, your heart through various methods, and even just through your iPhone. With that's Health Month. I think they sort of make it into a game for you. There's all kinds of sites. This is the walk that I want to do next. I want to leave from St. Stephen and follow the coast in New Brunswick, and I want it to be an outdoor experience. So if I can find someone to drive with me. People were worried about my safety on the road for the Nova Scotia one, but I was fine. I had no trouble. I ran into a baby bear. He didn't give me any trouble. And so it's not for safety, and I liked the idea that I didn't expend gas around Nova Scotia, but I just like the idea of being able to camp and have a real outdoor experience and stop exactly where I want. So if you can believe this, you're looking at Nova Scotia there. That was 3,000. It was 3,010 kilometers, Nova Scotia, and this would be 2,400, I believe. No, 2,100. So it's doable. And just feel like the old Courrier de Bois going down the St. Lawrence. And that they gave me a lovely welcome when I got home for Walkabout. There's this paper banner, and I tried to break through it, and it didn't work. But we wanted to open it up for questions, and